Hello, I'm Dr. Mickey Fineberg, and with me today is Dr. Gary Dumais. We're business psychologists, and a key part of our practice is assessing candidates for mission-critical jobs. Today, we're comparing boutique firms like ours with large consulting and executive search firms. Now, Gary and I have been boutique firm guys for much of our careers, but we've seen and learned a lot about how large firms tend to operate. And Gary has had the distinct advantage of subcontracting for large assessment groups that do both internal and external candidate assessments. So Gary, what is your experience with the big firms?
Thank you for the introduction, Mickey. Yeah, it's true. Before starting my own consulting firm, I did work for the large human resource consulting firms. And even today, on occasion, I'll work with them as a subcontractor. So I know how they operate. I've been on the inside, so to speak, and I can speak to that. Let me begin with the upside. So the large human resource consulting firms usually have a large amount of resources available to them. So imagine you're a big corporation and you've got hundreds of candidates that you have to assess in a short amount of time or in many different locations around the globe. A large HR consulting firm might be a good option for you.
Understood.
Yeah, however, on the downside, these large firms often suffer from a lot of the same issues that large corporations do. Number one is costs. They can be very expensive. If you're a large HR consulting firm, you probably have high overhead costs. It costs a lot of money to keep offices open around the country and around the globe. It costs a lot of money to have hundreds of consultants on your payroll, etc. And those costs get passed down to the client in the form of higher fees.
Yeah, so they have large firms have very large operating budgets and probably large marketing budgets as well.
Yeah, and even while you're paying more money, you're not necessarily getting better value.
Okay, talk about that.
Yeah, so I've seen that take a number of forms. One form it can take is that these large firms usually have some very experienced and senior consultants as part of their team, and they use those consultants to sell the project to the clients. Especially during the proposal phase. But when it comes time to actually deliver the project, once the deal is signed, then they staff that project with their junior consultants.
Okay, so the adults sell it and the kids do it.
Right, that's one way to put it, and it's to the tune of profitability. Again, these large firms, they're accountable to their shareholders and things like that, so they can pay these junior consultants less money on these large projects. But from a client perspective, you're paying top dollar, and I've seen instances where you've got people without even a background in psychology, these junior consultants who aren't business psychologists doing assessments.
Right.
And yet the client's paying a lot of money for that.
Right. Are there any other value-related factors that are
yes. Again, thinking about profitability, there's a tendency for large firms to try and oversell. Sell the client more than what's actually needed. Overkill. So what I've seen competency models that were way more complicated and time-consuming and expensive than they needed to be. Job analyses that were, again, way more complicated and time-consuming than they needed to be. Even interviews. I've seen interview processes where they interview a candidate for 4 hours. 4 hours at a time.
Right. Yeah, I've heard about interviews that are really extensive like that, but it also at the expense of using or not using at all really good psychometric instruments, which really offers a good balance with interviewing in terms of making solid interpretations and conclusions. In other words, without the instruments, there could be some misleading interpretations and conclusions. What is it like being a young consultant with a big consulting firm?
How do you mean?
Well, you know, the life expectancy, how long they really stick.
Yeah, so what I've seen is a lot of the newer consultants will look for a big firm to gain some experience. You know, you're early on in your career, you join a big firm. I mean, I did this. You spend a few years at the firm, you learn all that you can learn, and then you move on. Either way, there's not as much focus on the client. You know, you and I, when we develop a relationship with a client, we're looking to work with that client for years.
Yeah.
And we're, you know, if they need something, you know, we get a call on the weekend or an evening or something like that, we're there to do whatever we can to meet that client's needs. But at these larger firms, you've got higher consultant turnover,
Right.
people who are less dedicated,
Probably
you know,
less dedicated.
over the long term.
Yeah.
And as a client, you experience that. And in fact,
Lack of continuity.
yeah. And if you are a client of a large firm and you're not a huge account, then you're less likely to get priority attention when you have a request.
Okay, all very interesting stuff, Gary. But you know, I've also noticed with executive search firms the chance for compromised objectivity.
Tell me more about that, Mick.
Well, some executive search firms are now offering recruiting services as traditional
Yeah.
with assessment services under the same house.
Oh, yeah.
And recruiters make large sums of money sourcing and placing qualified candidates.
I have seen on average a recruiter earn 20 to 30% of a candidate's first year salary for placing that candidate. That's a lot of money. That's a significant incentive to place the candidate.
Yeah, so there's a lot at stake for search firms to bring in significant placement fees. So it's therefore conceivable that a recruiter from an executive search firm will pressure an assessor to word their selection reports more favorably than they actually might be or should be.
Yeah, Mick, that's conceivable. And what I've seen too, it doesn't even have to be direct. You know, it doesn't even have to be spoken. Just being an assessor working in a company could possibly lose a lot of money from not placing a candidate, you could indirectly feel like
feel that pressure.
Bias to pass the candidate.
Even in my own practice years ago, I tried to combine assessment with recruitment and discovered that doing both compromised my own objectivity. I was like my own fox guarding the hen house.
So you discovered you're human.
Yeah, exactly. To sum up, we're saying that smaller, leaner firms with the right assessment programs can help clients select quality candidates and avoid hiring mistakes at a much lower cost.
Absolutely.
Time and money.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gary. And please call us for more information. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for watching.